You wanna go, you wanna leave. So baby, come and get away with me. You wanna go, you wanna leave. So, I just pretty much threw Christianity out the window. I tried to be a Christian. It only lasted maybe 2 months, 2.5 months, and I just totally fell back into the world. I just don't think at the time I was ready to give everything to become a Christian and jump all the way in, so that's why I easily fell back into the world. And so there was a few things about this testimony that I didn't mention. When I first arrived in Kansas back in 2010, I was staying in an apartment, and I decided to reach out to my Uncle Willie and try to get a hold of him. And I did get a hold of him within like the first month. So like I say, he lived up in Kansas City, Missouri, so he invited me to go out there and meet him for the first time and get to know him and everything like that. And so I drove up there and I met him. He was a good dude, we had a couple beers together at the time. He's real down to earth, treated me with love, fed me steak, everything went well. And then after visiting him, I think I even stayed the night there. After visiting him, I drove back and went back on my normal schedule. And right around Thanksgiving time, my mother and my brother came up to visit me from Wyoming. And Calvin, her boyfriend, and my brother's girlfriend and their kids, they come up to visit me. And right after they left and went back to Wyoming, my uncle invited me to go back up there to Kansas City again for Thanksgiving dinner. So I did. So I went up there a couple times and spent some time with them and tried to get to know them and stuff like that. And I tried to ask him about my father and what was really going on with all that. And he's like, he really didn't have much to say. He was just like, I really wish he would step forward and try to get to know you also, but that's totally up to him. And he also told me that he hasn't even really seen my dad that much either. Like, even though they're brothers, they grew up together, I think they had something going on between them where they didn't spend too much time together. So I don't really know all the background story to all that. And at the same time, when I was still in Wyoming back in 2008, I reached out and I just was curious one day and I typed in McCool. I knew my younger brother's name because my dad had a son also. His name was Henry McCool, so I was just messing around and I typed in on MySpace Henry McCool, and a picture of this kid showed up, and I never knew what Henry even looked like. So I started messaging him back in 2008, and long story short, he was my brother. That's my younger brother. So me and my younger brother started a form of communication way back in 2008. And at that time, I was maybe 25 years old or so, and he was real young at the time. He was like maybe 14 years old, 13 years old, something around there. And so we started forming a conversation with each other. But even when I was talking to my younger brother way back in 2008, he was keeping it on the down low from his dad and his mother. Like, they didn't even know that he was talking to me, because he knew that, maybe they would say something or whatever. So we just kept it on the down low. And so fast forward to 2011, when I accepted the Lord as my Savior and everything like that. Like I say, I only lasted 2.5 months, and I got rid of everything from my life, throughout all the CDs, just everything that was causing any kind of hindrance towards that life. And I tried to be a Christian, and it only lasted for a little while, and I fell straight back into the world, and I just wasn't ready at the time. That's what I think, So after this time, I'm just still working and everything like that, and I mess with some girls again. I go straight back into that lifestyle because that's all I really know. Just working a lot, and I'm trying to progress and working a lot and stuff like that. But as far as relationship side of things, that wasn't I wasn't ready to get into a relationship or anything like that. Just because I was dealing with all the hurt of going through court litigation for my son, not having him in my life. I'd go down there and then they would make me do like supervised visitations, and all this was hard on me, because I was there when he first came out the womb, and I helped raise him for the first 5 years of his life. But now, since me and his mom are together, it's just like I have no rights. I can't see my son, and if I want to see him, it's got to be supervised visitations. So all this was pretty rough on me. I was going through a lot, and I didn't want to get involved in another relationship right away. I wanted to take my time, heal, and get everything under control. And so I think it was a few months after, I tried Christianity and didn't make it. My Uncle Willie, he was up in Kansas City, Missouri, and he was living with his girlfriend. They weren't married or nothing like that. And she ended up calling me one day out of the blue. And she said she had some news to tell me. So I was like, well, what's going on? So she called and told me that my uncle started kind of losing his mind. Because he had an asphalt company, just like a little truck doing patchwork or whatever. He called up whoever he had his truck loan through, and he just pretty much told him, yeah, I'm not going to pay you guys any more payments. Just go ahead and come on down and pick up your truck, I just don't want to pay any more payments. So they come and pick up the truck, but he left all of his tools and everything in there. I guess he was done working too, like didn't have no care in the world. And shortly after that, like he started kind of losing his mind, and she ended up having to put him in like a mental hospital there in Kansas City, Missouri. But you couldn't go see him unless you were on the family list, and he had some doing with the family list, so it was real weird. It's like I established a relationship with him and seen him a few times, and we had a great time. And then like a year after I seen him, he started losing his mind and had to be admitted to the hospital. And so that was the story with that, and it's just like, what can you do? So during this whole time, I'm still communicating with my brother Henry, and he's older now, coming up 2011, he's like 17 or maybe 18 years old. And I'm still communicating with him a lot, trying to have communication and relationship. But I didn't talk to my dad, and like me and Henry, sometimes I would get down and out and ask him about my dad, and Henry's like, yeah, you're a good guy to me and everything like that, but I don't know why he hasn't reached out to you. Maybe he's just, afraid of how you'll react, or just, feel down and out. So that's just pretty much what he told me. And so as more and more time goes on, I'm still working a lot of hours at the refinery, making a lot of money out there. And they progressed me up to top craftsman. And top craftsman pay at the time was $37 an hour. So this is pretty good money, and I'm working a lot of hours. So it's like $120 a year or something like that, And I was like 29 years old, it's really good money. And I was out one night with one of my buddies, he was in his 50s, and we went out and had some beers, me and him and his wife one night. And she was telling me, hey, how about I hook you up with this gal? I know this gal, that does my nails and all this and all that. And I was like, who are you talking about? We were laughing, having a good time. And she's like, no, I'm serious. I know this girl that does my nails. And she seems like a pretty good woman. Maybe you might want to take her out on a date. And so I says, okay, well, I guess go ahead and set it up, So she went ahead and set us up to go out on a date or meet or whatever. And I tried contacting her a few times, but at the time I was working like 7 12-hour days. So I told her that I wanted to meet her and take her out for dinner or go do something, but she probably thought that I was just blowing smoke because I would always tell her I want to take her out, but work really got in the way. When you're working 7, 12-hour days, it's hard to do anything. So as more and more time went by, it's just like, well, I'll get around to it when I can. So like I say, when I moved down to El Dorado, Kansas, they told me they didn't need no welders. Well, I thought they would utilize me here and there. Well, I was down there for 3 years, and during the whole time I was down there, I've only done like 4 x-ray welds. And, I was like, man, I really want to try to keep up my welding somewhat, or if they won't let me weld, I might as well pick up another skill. And so I went and talked to one of the trainers and everything, and, I had so many specialty skills, so I told him I wanted to learn how to run cranes. And he says, all right, I'm sure we could get you in some cranes. And so they started getting me training on cranes. They set me up out in the field, and I was learning how to run a crane. They would just have me pick up something, swing it over, set it down, and just learn all the controls and how to set it up. And so one day I just practiced on that crane, and it was like a 30-ton Grove crane. I was practicing on that, picking stuff up, moving it around, setting it down. And then the next day I thought I was going to go out there and practice some more out in the field. But the next day they had a hot job, so the guy told me, go ahead and jump in that crane and drive it around to the unit. And I was all, to the unit? He's all, yeah, don't be afraid, just get in there. Come on, we got to go get this job done. And so the second day run this crane, he made me drive it to a unit and made me pick some heavy equipment up. But, he kind of helped me along the way, helped me set it up and teach me what he knew. So I thought that was pretty cool. So with the crane cert there in the refinery, you had to have like 200 hours of seat time, and then you had to pass a written test and a practical test. Well, we were coming up on just like a big turnaround that was coming up soon, and I had like 200 hours seat time, right? And so I had all my seat time in, but I didn't get around to doing a practical or a written test. And I was even running their big cranes. They had a 130-ton huge crane out there, big, huge tires and everything. I was learning on that also, So I was wanting to get as many skills underneath my belt as I could. And so during this time, I finally ended up going out on a date with this chick that my friend's wife was trying to hook me up with. She was a Vietnamese chick, and her name is Hang. And I met her and stuff, and she seemed real nice. So we ended up setting up a date and going from there, And I really liked her, and she has a great personality and everything like that. So we started hanging out a lot with each other. And then like a week or so goes by, and we start dating each other, And made it official, I guess, what you could say. So we started dating each other, and I really like her and stuff like that. So we just go with the flow. And right after I met her, I wanted to buy my second house in El Dorado. I left my first one in Wyoming and just leased it out and had a manager manage that property. And that was going fine. Everything was going good with that. And I wanted to buy another property there in El Dorado. And actually, I was looking for like 9 months to a year, and I couldn't find a good property. Finally, I ran into a house, and it was a good property, so I ended up buying another house in El Dorado. Right after me and Hank started dating with each other, I closed on that other property in El Dorado, bought my second house. And so I lived in that house maybe a couple months, then I asked her to move in with me, and she moved in with me, and everything was going good, just pretty much work, living life, and I started dating Hank, and she's living with me. And one thing I didn't say about this is, way back when I threw Christianity out the window, I went back into my old ways and stuff like that. And a lot of stuff was going wrong. I had a lot of thoughts in my head. And I was making wonderful money, but, I was thinking to myself, like, I don't have my son in my life. I'm fighting in court, spending all this money for him just to be back in my life. I don't know if I want a relationship. Just, man. And there's a few times, I drive home, and from work or just doing whatever on the weekend. And I was just crying, I was just crying, just, man, praying to God and just asking him, why does my life have to be like this, I'm making all this money and everything else, but I feel so empty inside, and I would cry my eyes out, And then I finally got to the point where it's like I was asking God, I was asking him, if you have a woman for me, bring a woman into my life that's good for me, and they'll help change my life, and change me into a totally different person. And, a few months after I said that, I ended up meeting Hang, and pretty much fell in love with her. And so she moved in with me, and we're staying in that new house, and everything's going good. I can't ask for anything else. I take her to Wyoming to meet my family, and they like her and everything like that. Well, I think March comes around of 2013, and some stuff goes on at work, and some stuff I'm not really too proud of, but I made a mistake at work, and we talked about it with the bosses and everything like that, and they decided the best thing for me was just to resign at that time. So March of 2013, I ended up resigning, and my plans were to move back to Wyoming so I could be closer to my son. Court was getting towards the end of court, and everything was getting established, so visitation rights were going to be established. And so after I resigned from work, I was just thinking about my property, and I really kind of felt down at this time about what I did, but that's life. You live and you learn, and you just got to say, hey man, I made a mistake, and I just got to keep going. That's life. I just can't throw everything away just because I made a mistake. And so after I resigned from the refinery, I thought about stuff, and I thought, well, if I'm going to move back to Wyoming, I'm just going to go ahead and lease out this house too and keep it as an investment property. I'm not going to sell it, because every time you sell a house, you lose money. You lose at least close to $20,000 or more on a house whenever you sell it. And we'll get into that later when I talk about some real estate. But so I finished, when I first moved into that house, I painted all the interior walls and just fixed some things here and there and made it really look pretty sharp. And so I had a manager come over, and I finished, whatever odds and ends I had to do on that house, and put it under contract and ended up leasing it out, through her, and she managed the property. And at the time, me and Hang were together maybe 9 months or so. It wasn't that long, 9 or 10 months. And then I told her, well, I'm going to move back to Cheyenne, and I don't know what you want to do. I guess you got to find another boyfriend. And she was like, well, I really want to be with you. And I was just like, well, you could be with me, but you'll have to move to Cheyenne with me. If you're willing to move to Cheyenne, you could come. And she's like, I really want to stay with you, Things are good, and I want to stay with you, So the deal was I would move down to Cheyenne first, back to Wyoming, and then she would follow, 3 or 4 months later, after she gets everything situated with her job and stuff like that, kind of deal. And she was just going to give up her job, just to follow me. So, I thought, if a woman's willing to do that for me, I better hang on to her. And so I ended up leasing out my property and then moving back to Cheyenne. And this was probably in April, April of 2013. So I left the refinery, moved back to Cheyenne. And I had to do 2 trips to get all my stuff. The first trip I went down by myself and put all my stuff into storage, and my house was still leased out in Cheyenne, so, it's not like I can move back in there right away. But their lease was ending soon, within a couple months or something like that. And then on the second trip, my Uncle Daniel drove with me all the way to Kansas to get the rest of my stuff and drive back. And about the time we got back with the second load, my manager already called me from El Dorado and said that they already had someone who wanted to lease out the property. So, you know, everything was falling together, so they started leasing out this property. Well, I'm back in Cheyenne thinking, well, I'll just, since I have a trade underneath my belt, since I'm a journeyman pipe fitter and everything else, and a welder, I'll just go back to work for the union. So I went back to work with the union, signed up all the paperwork and everything like that. But the only thing is I never got a welding certificate from the union. I got a welding certificate from the refinery, and that stayed with the refinery. And the thing with those welding certificates is you have to stay up on them every 6 months, and if you don't, you end up losing them. But I was able to hang on to mine through the refinery since the whole time I was there. I just never achieved one through the union. But just stay with me, guys. You know, I got more content coming, and we'll catch you in the next part. See you later.